and moderating this panel. Dr. Hartley-Moore is the new Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs in SUNY. And before everyone popped on, we were talking about how long she's been here, and it's been about 6 weeks now. She joins us most recently as the Chief Academic Officer over in the Utah system of higher education. So she brings a wealth of experience to SUNY, and we're really excited to have her hosting this conversation on experiential learning.
Well, thank you, Ed. I am excited to be here with you. And just a quick note about me, my background is in applied learning as a student and as a faculty member. I have a degree in applied anthropology. I spent a lot of time as a student working on applied projects in various degrees along the way to my PhD, which all were translatable into career skills that have really helped me along my career trajectory. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, something I tried to embed into my classes as a faculty member as well. This webinar, if you've read the descriptions, is going to be exploring how campuses can activate student talent, build on institutional expertise, and harness emerging technologies to expand hands-on learning. So we're going to be talking a bit about career readiness and competency development through experiential learning, but that's kind of the focus for the entire series. We're kicking off with an overview of experiential learning within the SUNY system and some of the work of folks in the FACT2 Council and other places. So I am very excited to be able to introduce to you Dr. Mara Huber, who is a FACT2 co-chair and Senior Director of Instructional Innovation and Transformation at UB. And we are also joined by Abigail Bryant, who is here with me in the SUNY System Admin offices as Director of EOP Student Success. But I happen to know, having just joined SUNY from a different system, that folks outside of SUNY may very well be watching these recorded webinars. And so, Mara, I would love it if you could introduce yourself to us a bit. Tell us how you came to be interested in experiential learning, but also explain to folks what the FACT2 Council is.
Well, I thank you. It's such an honor to be here and to kick off this series is exciting. So I work at the University of Buffalo and I serve as a Senior Director for Instructional Innovation and Transformation. And that's a new role, leading a new team and helping our university support our instructional faculty and our departments in integrating AI and instructional innovation across and within the curriculum. I have been engaged in the work of experiential learning for over 10 years, actually, and was involved in the early efforts when the SUNY Chancellor made applied learning a SUNY-wide initiative. So many, I think, on this meeting were part of that. I am among the diverse folks across our system who really resonate with the work of experiential learning and have greatly enjoyed collaborating with colleagues, including Abby. So I'm so excited to be in this conversation. But what I do want to say is that I've also benefited from the innovation ecosystem. And I don't know if Kim Salzo is here, but I had PIF funding to support our startup of our experiential learning network and project portal. And I had IITG funds to develop my global work, which has led to a Spencer Vision Grant that we just found out we won, a Fulbright. And so for me, this work and SUNY's support has really been foundational to the innovation that I'm leading now, but to all of that. So really excited. To me, FACT2 is an opportunity to continue the work with the colleagues who are the ones really putting forth the innovation, and to really focus on this issue of access and equity, and to make sure that all of our campuses and all of our students have access to these really high impact experiences. And I think it's time that we really focus on scaling and how we can work together. So excited to meet you, Julie, and be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much. And Abby, I would love it if you could also introduce yourself and tell us how you came to be excited about experiential learning. And also, in case folks are listening to the recording later out from outside the SUNY system and don't know what EOP is, if you could briefly explain that too.
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to have this conversation. My name is Abigail Bryant. I do go by Abby. I work in the Office of Opportunity Programs here at SUNY System Administration. And when I was asked to participate in the Experiential Learning Task Group, I said yes without hesitation. But once you get to know me a little bit more, you'll know that I do that often. I was asked in the midst of actually reading Ruha Benjamin's recent book, Imagination, a manifesto, where she says, in the process of imagination, we confront this little voice in our head whose job it is to police our own imaginations. And so experiential learning for all is kind of this dream that I've always envisioned for every single one of my students, in particular in EOP, but of course, all the students in SUNY system. And Benjamin's work and the work of this task group is to say that it's possible, right? That we can build together in community the necessary infrastructure so that every student gains the benefits of a well-rounded college experience. And that has to include experiential learning. And I think it also includes, right, meeting their basic needs, feeding their intellectual curiosities, all while feeling like they belong and deserve to be a part of these opportunities. And so experiential learning and EOP for me go together like peanut butter and jelly, right? Or Jay-Z and Beyonce, if you're like me. Anyone who has heard me speak knows what's coming next. I always love to talk about the history of the Educational Opportunity Program. It was established in New York State legislation in 1967 by freshman Assembly Member Eve at the time, who believed that higher education was a vehicle out of poverty. So our program enrolls low-income students who show potential for success. Eve and his colleagues believed in this program before it could show proof of concept, which we have after 50 plus years of doing this work, thousands upon thousands of student graduates that are still right here in New York State working, sending their children to college and really breaking those barriers and breaking out of that cycle of poverty. And so on the surface, EOP really addresses the idea around access and opportunity to higher education. But as you learn a little bit more about EOP on your campuses, you'll start to realize and see why experiential learning is critical to the work that we do. EOP is intentionally designed to provide students with all of the tools and experiences that they need that they otherwise would not have access to. So EOP as of today is on 55 of our campuses, and we guide our students towards student success by distilling institutional policies, expectations, and knowledge using an anti-deficit approach. So by creating a lot of these necessary conditions for our students to experience what it means to really be on a journey to success, our work really cuts across different departments and silos that still exist in our system that we would love to see kind of fall apart. And this is how we land to experiential learning. So I'll stop here because I know that Julie, in part of your introduction, you'll talk a little bit about some published research, in particular the AAC&U's research around high impact practices. So I will stop here and I'll jump in later on, but I'm so happy to be here and I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Great, thanks, Abby. So well, look at that. It's not going into presentation mode, so you'll just have to see the previews. Sorry, everybody. I do want to talk just a little bit about a quick overview of experiential and applied learning work within the SUNY system, and then we'll jump right into a discussion. So in 2014, Chancellor Nancy Zimpher stressed the importance of high impact learning practices and applied and experiential learning. And then in 2015, the Board of Trustees passed a resolution calling for SUNY to work collaboratively to ensure that all students enrolled in academic credential programs have an opportunity for applied or experiential learning. And we define that in a number of different ways. There we go. We think of applied and experiential learning as falling within the broader category of high impact practices or high impact teaching practices. Those have been defined by a number of different organizations, and we fit within the definitions offered by AAC&U and NASH that are activities that require active student involvement and engagement and that are based in data-driven, evidence-based practices. There are a number of high impact learning practices that have been shown through research of various forms to have a significant impact on student retention and eventual completion and graduation. A lot of research from AAC&U and from NASH, also from George Q and from NESE and SESI surveys. We know that things like first year experiences, writing intensive courses, internships, capstones can really make a difference in students' connections to the campus and their sense of themselves as students being willing to engage and continue on in their academic work. So at SUNY, applied learning refers to an educational approach where students directly learn how to apply skills, theories, and models from the courses that they've been engaged in with creative projects or independent or directed research. They may be out in the community. The experiences may be embedded as part of their course. If it's going to be counted as applied learning for the purposes of the Board of Trustee resolution, we have specific standards that those courses have to meet. We have three big buckets or umbrellas of applied and experiential learning within the SUNY system. One is SUNY Works, which is focused on work-based learning. So this can include internships or co-op placements, traditional types of clinical placements, practica, work-study experiences, which are often co-curricular counts too for applied and experiential learning. SUNY Serves is something that I was really excited to learn about when I came to the system. We have embedded service learning, community service, and civic engagement expectations for student experiences on our campus. And then what a lot of people think of as the traditional applied learning routes, where students are getting hands-on research experience, doing field study experiences abroad, or engaging in creative work as part of their classes. So we have a couple of different councils and committees that help advise the system on applied learning and directions we should be taking into the future and how to coordinate between the institutions. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to members of the FACT2 Council and we can connect you to some of the work of those other committees. We also are very interested, as I said before, in evidence-based practice. And so we are actively engaging in research around the the applied learning work that happens at our campuses. And so I'm going to stop there and we'll start sharing some experiences from Mara and Abby. So I'm going to start first again with Mara. And Mara, I would love it if you could tell us, give us an example of what you see as a good evidence of an applied or experiential learning project with which you're familiar, and just talk us through what that project was and what strikes you as beneficial about that particular project. You're muted, Mara.
Sorry. I'm going to go right to sort of my sweet spot, which is global learning. In my work, I connect faculty and students with community-based partners who are doing the work of sustainable development around the world. And I focus in West and East Africa, and I was looking because I think some of my partners may be on the call and can put themselves in the chat. And I want to focus on just sharing the different types of iterations. I think curricular versatility is something that we need. And the reason I like project-based learning is you can insert it within courses, you can do it co-curricularly, you can do it over long periods of time or short periods of time. And so I want to give an example, and I'll share it just in a few different ways. So we worked with multi-section courses around environmental studies, and the course involved students developing proposals around sustainable development. And the traditional way of doing it was conceptually. They'd sort of pick a sustainable development, they'd come up with a proposal that was conceptual in nature. So what we tried to do is actually connect the class with a real partner doing the work of sustainability in Africa. We've done a few different iterations. So ahead of time, the students got to learn the profile. They got to do some exploration about the part of the world. They broke up in teams. The faculty did some pre-work. And then it was a simple Zoom call where we connected the class with the partner. The partner gave an overview and then got to entertain questions. So the students had to prepare questions. And so the real innovation was that the students were developing the proposal for the partner based on real data, real challenges, real needs, and we're thinking about what was best for the partner. We've done that in a full study abroad version. So I've taken students to Tanzania, students from different disciplines, working on projects that, again, address the need of a community partner, but at the same time align with their academic interests and support skill and competency development. We've done virtual study abroad. We've done projects through our project portal. And so I share that because I think there's this notion that high impact experiential learning has to be such a big burden that it's something that faculty get a little overwhelmed with, and the logistics can seem overwhelming. But a simple, that simple flip or switch of making an assignment based on actual engagement and using Zoom and using, the same technology that we use to engage our own students can be used to engage partners. So I share that just as a way to think about this work a little bit differently. And we found that it was very impactful. So many of the students then wanted to do more involved projects. The faculty were able to put that technique into a grant where they were going to look at local partners around accessibility, so it's translatable. But project-based learning is a really exciting way to engage both students and partners.
That is a great example. I love it. And I love how you were innovative in the use of technology there too. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Abby, how about you? An example of of experiential learning that you find exciting?
This is very hard. I find a lot of these things very exciting. So I think what I'll start with is perhaps the most recent. So as you all know, the chancellor has been very interested in seeing more and more of our students participate in internship opportunities. So the EOP program here at SUNY was able to launch a career development internship for students from any of our campuses to engage with local or regional state agencies, and they would get an internship opportunity to really engage in that in any of the different realms that they're interested in. It began as this big undertaking. There were about 4 different offices here at System, all engaging in the conversations about how can we do it, when do we do it, how do we get students access to travel and funding, how do we market it, how do we get students involved, how do we get them engaged. So there were a lot of different ideas that was really coming together, and the collaboration that was necessary to get us to where we are today was a lot. But once we got to that and we got our students enrolled and identified for this program, it has kind of jumped to something that is phenomenal. So each month I have the opportunity to connect with the students that are doing the internships. And what I get to do is just ask them, like, how are things going? I get to connect with them around interviewing skills and ways to leverage and translate these experiences into their next experience or their next role. And in our most recent check-in just last week, I asked the students, what have you learned so far? And each of the students kind of gave me a little bit of what they were learning. Some of it was extremely technical and I had no clue what they were talking about, right? This is one of our students is doing an internship and she's doing the tech side of things. Another student is doing construction and I couldn't even come up with the word beam. And he was like, yeah, we look at beams and we are doing all of these things and we're building this building. And it was great. And it was great to learn from the students, but also give them an opportunity, you know, to teach me a little bit about what their experiences are. And then the other thing that I noticed in that conversation, one of the students said, this experience has given me the opportunity to identify the gaps where what I learned in a classroom and I'm trying to apply it here. There's some things that I was missing that I now can go back to my faculty member or my advisor and say, I think I need some more work in this area. And that realization for that student, I think, came in as part of that conversation as we were pulling it out. But it really did spark something in the student that, you know, before I graduate, I really want to engage with my faculty members to learn more about these areas that I'm unsure about. And then the other thing that students really highlighted was that they had the opportunity to ask more questions and just keep asking questions. And the safety of being an intern from your university to be able to do that, it made them feel more secure in that space and made them feel like it's okay to ask questions because of my role and where I am. And that's something that's very hard for a lot of students to do, right? To be vulnerable and to show up unknowing and be willing to kind of take in more information from faculty or whoever they're working with. So that was a really, really cool engagement that I had just last week. So I figured that would be, since it's so fresh in my mind, I wanted to share that here as well. And I think the most promising thing, and Mara kind of talked about this towards the end of her answer to this question, is it's kind of like this gateway to, I want to do more. Every single one of the students are like, can I do this again? I don't care if I have to switch sites because I have to go back home to Queens, you know, after my time here over the summer. I want to do this again. I want to experience more of this. I want more of this. And it's really about like just breaking that seal for a lot of students to show them that it's possible, that they can, right? Building self-esteem, building our students' wellness, right? Around, you've been in school for quite a time as a sophomore, you have gained a lot of knowledge already. Let's start working on how you can apply it to your real life. And these opportunities really give the students just a chance to see themselves as, I can do this, right? It's not just getting a grade, it's being able to say, and beyond this grade that I received in this class, I can go into the workplace and I'll be prepared to engage in the work that I want to see myself do in the future. And then the last thing I would say before I stop talking, because y'all, I can talk. But the last thing I would say is that one of my students talked about how it's the opposite of what they thought it would be. They showed up to this internship. They had these ideas. I made all of them write goals on what they're going to do on their first day and how is it going to be like, what are the questions you're going to ask? And 3-4 weeks in, it's not what the student thought it would be. And some of the probing questions then is, okay, let's talk a little bit more about that, right? So it's not jumping to change your major, right? It's about what are the other experiences that you're looking for? What are some of the things that you're surprised to be engaging? And then how do we help you translate that into your next opportunity as well? So that was one of the things that I'm working on right now. It took a lot of connection, building community, right? Working with multiple different departments to get us to start. And then once we got it up and running, it's been smooth since then.
That's great. Thank you so much. And the enthusiasm comes through from folks who help design these experiences for students to the students themselves. And that's the critical factor, I think, is how students seem to just really embrace these experiences, most students. Let's talk about why experiential learning is such a critical priority for SUNY and for the state of New York at this particular moment. Why do you think this is so important to us right now? I'm going to go to Well, Mara, you're unmuted. Or are you? I'm going to go to Mara first again. Sorry, Abby.
You know what? It's a great question because I think we are at an inflection point, and as a system, as institutions, it's time to be bold but thoughtful. And I think, you know, I'm constantly thinking about this because for a long time, although those of us in this work have known its importance, there's been extensive research on impacts on learning. Often it's been relegated as somewhat extra, right? The idea that if you can go on study abroad, great. If you have the opportunity to do an internship, and even within our institutions, sometimes there are feelings that what we do is sort of outside of the core of academia. You can look at it from workforce development, jobs, employability. You can look at it from enrollments and retention, which are becoming more and more important. But it however you look at it, it is at a point where I think the relevance of our institutions and our models are coming down to our ability to be nimble and to be responsive to a world that is changing very quickly. And I've been in higher ed my whole life. I love it. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, but we are not the most nimble entities, right? Like all of the structures and the processes that help us be so thoughtful and focus on quality sometimes get in the way. And we don't want to just throw things out or do things quickly, right? That's not us. So I see experiential learning as this dynamic bridge between our academics, between our programs, and the changing world. And I see it as sort of, I think of it as these stepping stones, right? These digital or dynamic stepping stones where students can connect, they can get close to the world, to challenges, to opportunities, they can develop their own practice, they can experiment while connecting everything back. And I think there are some dangers that we get this wrong, right? Like on one hand, we don't accept the responsibility or we say it's too big and we can't figure it out. And then others will continue to offer experiences, which is what is happening, right? Or we throw ourselves at the challenge and just sort of go about it haphazardly. So I focus on model development. I think we have to develop models that are scalable, that we can study, like all research and innovation, that can be adapted, can leverage technology. I have a model that I have in the playbook, Pearl framework, which is being used across Africa and across SUNY campuses. There are other models that should develop, but I think we need to take this work really seriously, and we need to think about it from a systems standpoint, because the threats are real. But what I will say is the opportunities, I think, are so exciting. They're beyond anything that we can imagine, right? We can prepare our students, for success, but we can also support our communities. We can support our ecosystems. We can come up with solutions. We can be impactful. So I think I can't think of anything, more positioned to help us navigate the moment that we're in. So I really, am appreciative that we can elevate this work through this conversation.
Yeah, and I love your emphasis on nimbleness and also your reference to relevance. And I think there is a national narrative and a perception in multiple communities that higher education may not be relevant. And that students might be better off getting right into the workforce and gaining the skills that they need to be employable. And so one of the things I love about applied learning and experiential learning is the relevance to real life experiences. So thank you for bringing that up. Abby, what about you? What is so critical about students and experiential learning at this particular moment for you?
So I kind of want to touch back a little bit on what Mara said, and then I'll try to get to the answer in some way, kind of fold it all together. Because one of the things that Mara said was, you know, for a long time, experiential learning was kind of like this asterisk or like this optional thing. And what we know as well is that that was kind of, it shouldn't have been optional. And that there were a lot of students who should have had these experiences as they were students that didn't know about it. And then that those that did, that had maybe more privileged understanding of higher education, how to navigate the spaces and how to really get the most out of your higher education experience, has always engaged in experiential learning. And I think as the demographics of who enrolls in our higher education system changes and how it continues to shift, it's part of why it's so critical, right? We can no longer operate in the space where this is optional, where it's an asterisk, because every single one of our students beyond graduation will need these experiential learning opportunities in order for them to compete in the workforce in the future, right? And we think about all of the news around the future of work, right? And you look at these different competencies that employers are expecting, and it honestly feels like that goalpost continues to shift. And so when students are graduating with a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, and they've had no other experience outside of the classroom to really talk about what they've learned, it's really difficult for them to compete in the world of work. And so I think that's part of why it's critical for us right now and why it's so important. But the other thing that I thought about when I saw this question, and as I was thinking about this presentation, is that the experiential learning is critical in this moment for our students. And I think less about the institution and like, you know, how it's going to help these schools do better. And I'm thinking more about how our students need these opportunities. There is a Harvard Graduate School study that was done, and they talk about young people's mental health. And we all know how devastating COVID-19 was for our students, how devastating that was in their ability to connect with one another, just dealing with loneliness and unclarity and like not knowing what the future holds. And so when I think about things like that, and I look at this study that really talks in their survey, and talking to young people who are reporting that they not knowing what they're going to do in their life, it makes them feel like they have no purpose, makes them feel like they have no meaning. And things like that is what makes me feel like experiential learning is right there for them, right? To be able to reestablish the meaning of their work, why they're here, why they're enrolled in school. And when it comes to doing that work, I think we can really create these opportunities to help students connect outside of the classroom with one another, with their future. And it can really just help them in general move away from this feeling of, I don't know what's next, and really give them something that they can latch on to. So when I think about experiential learning and the importance and why now, I think if we want to continue to support the mental health and the wellness of our young people as they're navigating a world that none of us know what it's gonna look like next, where every single one of us had a very different experience coming out of college and a very different political landscape, right? So when you think about all of this newness that they're going to engage in the future, our ability to help them navigate that newness by providing them with these experiential learning opportunities is exactly what we should be doing to make sure that our students are well. So
Yeah.
that's what makes me feel, that's the why.
Yeah, and that's a reason why I think it's so important to have a system-wide push for, being able to provide all students with access to those types of experiences, not just those who can afford to go on a study abroad trip or take an unpaid internship. So thank you for that. You talked about the benefits to individual students, and I just want to point out something that John Suarez put in the chat. Sorry, Ed, if you were about to do that, about the benefits to surrounding communities too, through applied learning that might happen through something like the Service Corps, where we can be reaching out to local communities that might have need for the expertise of our institutions and our students, and be connecting students to those opportunities there too. So thank you, John. Ed, were you going to add something?
Yeah, a couple people have sent me some questions in chat, and I wondered if it was a good time to cut
Sure.
in with them. And I think it relates to the conversation right now because we said in this present moment, why is experiential learning important right now? And the question was related to civic readiness and civic decision-making skills. I think that a lot of our panelists were talking and maybe speaking very globally, but I would like to, experiential learning, part of what I love about this is it's a very big umbrella term, and we can have service learning inside of it. We can have community service inside of it. We can have civic decision making and communicating with our community inside of it. So this person just expressed an interest for the panelists to talk a little bit about how or why we might connect experiential learning with those civic readiness skills, with the civic decision making skills.
An excellent question. Who would like to volunteer to take it? Go ahead, Mara.
I think I often focus on global local, right? Local, because I think it's a great way to sort of frame students' concerns and interests both at the local level and then broaden the lens to global. And I think there is why I like project-based learning so much is this idea of elevating the student as the problem solver, right? And that innovation happens when you're close enough to the problems, but not just as you see the problems, as the people who are addressing them. So I think, engaging students with local organizations, community-based organizations, just offers such a rich, space for learning and discovery. And it really allows the student to engage with the way that we have framed it is the challenge is adding value. I mean, it's a really powerful thing to say your challenge is to add value, right? Because what you need to do is you need to understand, you need to see it through other people's lenses. You have to try to find a way to look at your own resources. One of the things that I've learned through my work with both community and global partners is that students don't often see the resources that they have. They think, what can I do? I am a student, I'm a freshman, I'm a sophomore, right? They don't see themselves as having anything to really offer. And what's amazing is, especially in some of my global work, is when you realize what other people are trying to do and you look around at what you have available to you, you see your university or your college differently. This is amazing, the technology that our students have access to, the expertise, the resources. Often they're not aware of those resources because they're sort of in their bubble, right? We all are in our bubble. So there's something really powerful about approaching, community and civic types of opportunities and letting the student think about how they can add value and to see the sense of agency develop. We often, from a cognitive standpoint, see students stretch and be willing to learn when they want to help others, right? Or when they want to add value. So there's a lot of magic that can happen through creating those environments and those situations without putting tons of structure on the assignment. So we try to do just enough to sort of let that interface happen. I'm curious to hear Abby's response to that, because I know we do things differently, but there's always some synergies, right, Abby?
Yeah, I was just about to call out that synergy. So I'm happy that you brought up the community and the connection piece. And then one of the things that I latched onto as you were talking was around a bubble. And oftentimes when I think about our students, and I'm talking very specific to first generation students, EOP students with a very specific experience of leaving their community and going to this new community that's your institution. And a lot of the times they're still connected to home. And what I found, especially with around civic engagement, around advocacy, right? So EOP does a lot of advocacy work, going back to their communities and advocating for supports, doing a lot of talking to legislators and talking about what their needs are and really engaging students in that process is really important because they have people back at home that sometimes they feel a little bit of guilt of leaving, right? There's a survivor's guilt that comes around sometimes for our students, and they really have to navigate that. Sometimes they navigate it on their own. And what experiential learning, applied learning, civic engagement can really do is to help them see, like Mara was saying, the opportunity to help back home without taking themselves out of their education, in order to help the people in their community, in order to help, you know, their family members, their community members, that they can do it with the knowledge that they're gaining at our institutions. And our institution is going to give them the tools and the opportunities to reach back and give back in a way that helps them learn even more, right, about how to do this work really well. And so that's kind of my answer to that question around like civic engagement. What does that look like for us in particular with EOP? It's advocacy. It's giving the students the opportunity to go back home without physically going back home, right? It's about giving back. And a lot of our students often talk about how important that is because they need their communities to have access to the same opportunities that they have now. And a lot of the times they don't want to leave anyone behind. They want to bring everybody with them. One of the things we always say is lifting as we climb in EOP. And our students truly embody that. And these opportunities, experiential learning, is your opportunity to help them do it. And so that's how I would answer that question.
Love it. Thank you. I'm going to ask one final question, and that is, because this webinar series is being hosted by the FACT2 Council, which has a focus on technology, I would love to have you talk about the role that you see of technology in helping to make experiential learning more scalable or more accessible or more impactful for faculty and for students. So thoughts on how we might use technology.
I'm going to go first because I know Mara has so much to say about this. So what I'll do is one, please do not run out the door the minute you hear AI, right? So we're at the point where we all know the power of these new technologies, the opportunities that it provides to our students. Our students are engaging with these different technologies in many different ways. And for some of our students, they don't even know the full scope of what these technologies can do, right? So making sure that we are thinking more broadly about how to utilize these different emerging technologies like AI to really help our students. Again, the future of work is going in this direction. We need to start helping our students figure out how to use these items so that they can also benefit them in their future. So that is the highest and the greatest I can add to this conversation around AI and technology. And I would say one more thing before I let go. There are still reasons for you all to be cautious around utilizing AI as you're working with your students. Make sure that you're taking time to read what is being generated, because some of these technologies are sometimes coded in racial bias. So we want to be mindful of that as well. And so I'll stop here and pass it over to Mara because I know she has great things to share.
So one of the things that we've been doing at UB that has been really exciting is we've been offering seed grants to faculty to submit projects related to AI with focus on AI, but looking at instructional innovation and teaching and learning. And we're starting to see some really exciting ways to use Gen AI that you might not have thought about. So role playing is a huge area where you can actually sort of set up the AI to embody or, you know, personify a different audience or a different perspective and have the student sort of practice, right? And think about how they modify and how they develop some of the skills and competencies like communication, like problem solving, right? So you can sort of set up these situations. Troubleshooting. You know, often one of the great things we see in experiential learning or in terms of the skill development is, as Abby said, things never go as planned and you have to cope and you have to pivot, right? And it's through dealing with challenges and having a great mentor that you can actually develop the skills, but also the narratives around it. We've also looked at using AI together with GIS mapping. Most of your schools, in fact, SUNY, we have connections to story maps and ArcGIS that geography departments have been using, as well as public health, right, to map. We know mapping is an amazing way to engage students because they have to develop context of place. Having students explore partners again, but looking at place, looking at the relationships that your faculty and your institutions have, and inviting students in, looking at alum and using technology to make connections, connecting projects with workforce development and emerging jobs. These are all things that can be done so easily. We have to create these spaces that are safe, and that we call them sandboxes, right? Where faculty and our teams can play, but we can feel comfortable having students play. I think one of the hardest things as a psychologist is we feel that we have to be in control. We have to make sure that our students are getting the best experiences in learning. We see that as our role. But we need our students to innovate. We need ourselves to innovate. And there's a little bit of risk and playfulness in that may be a little bit new. So we are working really hard with the IT side of our house to create those sandboxes, right? And to have the instructional teams. Many of you have instructional designers, you have librarians, you have experiential learning offices. How can we rethink our support offices and our services to all rally around some of these innovations and create incentives so that we can experiment and innovate and share. Those of us who have been innovating are constantly wanting to share because it's also exciting. And as Abby said, there's a lot of trepidation, there's a lot of concerns. And so we're working quickly to do that. But I would say technology can support the experiential learning process directly, but it can also help our institutions scale. And I know not everybody gets excited about models and scaling and institutional stuff, but your faculty don't have to do everything, right? Like, you don't have to do everything. How can we set these models up so that we can utilize the functionalities to scale, to assess, to optimize, all the best that technology can offer? We just have to think about how we can leverage it for the benefit of experiential learning.
And I
Great. And
can I add really quickly before you go, Julie? I just wanted to say that I appreciate Mara's ability to also make it sound so simple, because it really could be that simple, right? But I also think, one of the technologies that we're talking about is right here, Zoom, right? How do you create a Zoom link and connect with students abroad? If you think about COIL, for example, SUNY COIL, and the work that they do of connecting classrooms across the world, right? How do you do that really well? Well, your classroom exists here and another classroom exists there, and finding the middle, right? And creating those opportunities right here on the computer screen is another great way to use technology. So I just wanted to highlight that, yes, it is, at some sense, it is a bit simple. And technology is there to make things easier. And I think that's really why, as humans, we create technology, is to make things easier to do. And sometimes if you look at it from that lens, as opposed to, well, I have to learn something new, I think it'll make it, you'll be on Mara's side and be able to say, yeah, you just use the technology and create some AI and get going, which is great.
And I think that's a great note to end on. I do want to come back and re-emphasize something that Mara mentioned because it reflects a question in the chat, and that has to do where people might go for support if they're trying to develop something for their own classes or for their departments. And in addition to these technology tools that Mara and Abby just mentioned, Mara also pointed out that librarians can often be a great resource and a support, and many of the campuses have centers for teaching excellence or learning technologies or applied and experiential learning that you can tap into too. If you're wondering about resources on your particular campus, my office may also be able to help. So if you need help and support, please do feel free to reach out to us and we'll see if we can make some connections for you. So thank you so much, everybody. And Ed, we'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, everyone. I think as we close up today, first I just want to thank our moderator, Julie Hartley-Moore, thank our panelists, Mara Huber and Abigail Bryant. I think this was a great conversation. And where I want to finish is thinking about where we are headed next. On our Experiential Learning task group website, we have our collection of webinars. And the next in our webinar series is a discussion on internships and the scalability support models for students and mentors. We're going next into course-based experiential learning. So I'm so glad we had this great overview today, a great kickoff for a whole series, and I'm excited for the discussions that follow. The registration link is available right on that website if anybody still needs to find that registration. And then it was alluded to a couple times throughout the program. We are trying to compile an experiential learning champion playbook, a series of moves and things that you can do to help experiential learning on your campus. We've had a first round of submissions that we are highlighting, and many of our panelists that come from the in this webinar series have submitted into the experiential learning champion playbook, but we are still accepting new submissions, and those submissions will be open right into the last day of our webinar series, May 1st. That's the second round of submissions. So we're working through those submissions kind of in the order we receive them. I hope people who come here, I know the reason why you're here is because you are the experiential learning champions on your campus. I hope you look through the call for proposals. I hope you will consider submitting them and that those will become a durable resource. And we will archive everything we're doing with the webinar series and the champion playbook all back on this website that we're working on through this year-long exploration of experiential learning with FACT2.
Great,
I want to
thank
thank
you.
you all.
Thank you, Ed. That's a great resource.
I want to thank you all for coming. It's been a great conversation, and just please join me in expressing a little appreciation for our panelists.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Julie.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.